I always believed that at some point it was the right form factor and it could be the tip of the spear to a much more broader legalization effort. And obviously, looking at what's happened over the last 24 months with the explosion of hemp beverage across the United States, I think we had the right idea. We might have just been about 12 years too, 13 years too early.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Dime. I'm Brian Fields, and with me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we got a very special guest, Eric Knudsen, co-founder of Keef Brands. Eric, thanks for taking time. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, guys. Glad to be on.
Excited to see you. Kellen, how are you doing?
Doing really well. Really excited to talk to Eric. It's nice to have a fellow Coloradoan back on the podcast. Super excited to dive into Keef Brands and everything Eric has his hands in. I know he's been in this space for about 15 years now, and his influence is widespreading. How are you, Brian?
Yeah, I'm stoked. I think whenever you can find someone who can talk about 15 years in this industry, it is tons of stories and maybe some stories that he doesn't want to relive or share. But I think that experience is really what's really critical to understand, because as some industries come online and some markets come online, some things stay the same, but some things continue to really grow in popularity. So Eric, for our listeners not familiar, can you go background on yourself and kind of how you found your way to the cannabis space?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So born and raised in Boulder, Colorado. Guess that's a good place to start. So got introduced to cannabis early on. Obviously, the university being there. I went to Boulder High, which is on the University of Colorado's campus. I ended up graduating from CU as well. But yeah, very early introduction to cannabis in high school and earlier in that, and found it pretty easy to sell weed early on. So we'll leave that there. But, cannabis has been a part of my life since I was 12, 13 years old. Getting out of college and out of high school, actually, I ended up starting a construction business locally with my family, kind of worked my way through CU doing that and really selling weed the whole time to kind of supplement the income. So cannabis has literally been a part of my life since very early on, about 30 years now. So obviously being in construction and development eventually, 2006 through about 9 were very difficult. Ended up watching my dad file a Chapter 7. My brothers, Scotty ended up in the Marine Corps. We had to shut down multiple businesses. It was a really tough time for a lot of people, obviously not just us, but a lot of contractors across all areas of construction. Yeah, luckily, like I said, cannabis had always kind of been steady force in my life. And then when the Cole memo came out, obviously in October 2009. We had actually already started rounding up medical marijuana cards here in Colorado under the old patient caregiver kind of framework, and had been basically getting geared up to open up a dispensary. We ended up opening a dispensary in Boulder, like one of the first 5 dispensaries in late 2009. While we were doing that, marketing guy that had done a lot of the photography for our construction projects, we'd been talking. He knew that we were in the cannabis side. He was looking to make a shift, and we started talking about products. Obviously, being that we had a dispensary, it was pretty easy kind of channel to test products on. We were putting everything we were seeing at that point, as you guys know, was like brownies, not named gummies, brownies and cookies, and that was about it. There wasn't a whole lot of product innovation going on. The gummies started coming out slightly thereafter. I think one had dropped pretty much right around the same time as we ended up starting Keef in January of 2010. So, kind of during a brainstorming session, he proposed the concept of a beverage. We threw it around for a while, and Keef Cola was born. So I think we put our first Keefs on the shelf in our dispensary in January of 2010. Saw them fly off. They were in brown bottles with literally shipping labels on them that said root beer, Keef Cola. Almost no artwork to them out the gate. The art came in February of 2010 when we brought on an awesome partner who's still a partner with the company now, Brant Nicholson, an amazing artist, 27 or 28 pro sports logos in his career. He was a designer on the Broncos and Nuggets. I think his first one was the LA Kings. So really awesome commercial artist. And he really helped us build the brand early on and portray us as much bigger than we were.
So one of the things I got asked about is you talked about the limited product availability and the different form factors. And one of the things that you brought to the table was a beverage, which wasn't one of the ones you listed. So was there internal conversations as, hey, like we want to do a different category? And what was the challenges internally? Was there a conversation where someone's like, hey, I think we should stick with like a chocolate? Who led the voice for the beverage? And then what was those early days like?
So, yeah, I mean, it was as soon as beverage came up and we started looking at it, I fell in love with it. My brother fell in love with it. It was, just from, obviously it's taken a long time to get beverage where it is now. But, throughout history, the two most commonly accepted forms of social interaction are drinking and smoking. So for me, it was just kind of a natural lean towards that direction. We really didn't want to come out with another gum. We already have heard and seen that a ton of gummies were dropping on the market. We believed that, beverage, if we got out ahead of the beverage, that we could really carve out a nice chunk of the market. Took a lot longer, obviously, than we'd hoped. That being said, obviously, with Keef being the dominant beverage player in Colorado for as long as we have, we've been able to maintain a really strong business, even though we only operate in about 3 to 5% of the total edible market. Here we're about 85%, 90% of the beverage market. So that's still a pretty sizable chunk. That being said, it was definitely early on very difficult. Beverage is probably one of the hardest products to produce. Our first products were not emulsions. So we weren't using oil. We were using cold water hash. So it's truly a rosin-based beverage for the first 3.5 years. I think it took us to about 2013, 14, when right around the time rec started hitting in Colorado, we realized that the cold water hashing method that we were using really wasn't scalable to the type of volume that we were anticipating coming. Being said, it was a cool process. Definitely stubbed our toe a lot during it to get it dialed into where we finally were. But we were using basically the finest micron hash through bubble bag processing, then decarboxylating it actually in pressure cookers, which was our secret sauce. So basically what happens is, you take that fine gland mic, the smallest gland mic trichomes, dry them out, test them, put them back into a liquid state, and then decarboxylate it. So what you wind up with is actually a full gland trichome that doesn't burst into oil. So it used to settle on the bottom of bottles, and you literally have to flip it to put it throughout. So you think of like a heavy microbrew, it's got like sediment at the bottom. Those are the first Keefs for years, but we found a way to decarboxylate completely and get that 100 milligram drink that we've become, really known for. But it was a pain in the ass. We built our first 3 bottling machines from scratch, counter pressure heads and stainless steel. Then eventually in 2011, we actually got a commercial loan from US Bank, believe it or not. They didn't know what we did, I don't think. I'm sure.
I don't think so.
Yeah, we bought a Maheen, which is actually built locally. Yeah, and we operated that Maheen in Colorado until 2019, I want to say, when we finally got that was a bottling machine where we used glass and then aluminum bottles. And then in 2019, we switched over to 2-piece cans, working with Cody filling systems, which is what we still work with today and all the markets we're in. So
that had to be fun in the early days when yield from biomass to make a product really didn't matter at all. It was just if you could get a product out on it, people were going to eat it up. Right?
Yeah, 100%. And then eventually the biomass thing did become an issue. So that led to more cultivation and because we didn't have a cultivation. I mean, we did at first. We ended up, rough story, but in 2010, 11, right as we started seeing traction, we got out of the dispensary, kept building Keef out into kind of a small facility. Really, our homes ended up in a spot in Weld County. Then our first partner decided to sign a lease in. And obviously, Weld was one of the first to opt out of cannabis.
No. Very conservative up here in Weld County.
We shut that down within about 2 months of opening the facility. Luckily, we had an out in the lease instead of if local approval didn't come through, we could move. So we ended up moving into a beautiful facility in Gun Barrel in Boulder. It was actually an old pharmaceutical manufacturing facility, about 14,000 square feet. Gorgeous facility. I mean, they made sterile injectable IV bags there. So literally they had clean rooms, tons of power, 20 plus foot ceiling height. So that was when we really dove in, got our first big investment dollars. It came from outside of us and family members. Built out, I think, a 50 light grow, brought in a triple 20-liter Eden in 2011, at the beginning of 2011. Started producing CO2 oil. That's really started playing around with vape pens, all of that really early on. And then, unfortunately, September of 2011, the city of Denver came out with a rule that said if you weren't in Denver, you couldn't sell in Denver. So we ended up having to shut that facility down. We walked away from a little over $800,000 in capital expenditures in the building and moved into a production facility in Denver. That by the end of this year will come for a full circle. We're actually moving back into that facility and buying it. So it's an old Safeway building. But that really started our licensing as far as IP licensing. We had our own facility to start. When Denver came up with that rule, we didn't have the money to build another one. So we found someone in operation. I studied a bunch of Coca-Cola licensing agreements, and we ended up basically signing one with, we kept all our equipment and we were able to move the canning, the bottling machine, the extractors and all that in Denver. But it was some really rough years there early on, where I wasn't sure the company was going to make it, even with our brand penetration. It took everything we had.
I think one of my favorite aspects is thinking about right now, like 15 years ago, I would assume you were bullish on beverage, right? And it's probably difficult now to process like how long it's taken. So was the concept kind of where we are today of like, this is where beverage can be?
Yeah. Honestly, I believe that at some point, I think we all thought that legalization was going to happen a lot quicker than it has happened. But I always believed that at some point it was the right form factor and it could be the tip of the spear to a much more broader legalization effort. And obviously, looking at what's happened over the last 24 months with the explosion of hemp beverage across the United States, I think we had the right idea. We might have just been about 12 years too, 13 years too early. That being said, it led to a lot of product innovation. And, for us to maintain the market share we've done and to build, what is now a very large piece of the market on the regulated side, it's the 100 milligram drinks that we're known for. It's the functional 100 milligram beverages with other minor cannabinoids, really just finding a way in a niche within that regulated space when you're not, you're working. And obviously the biggest issue is space. These dispensaries aren't set up as liquor stores. They're not set up to be able to take pallets of beverage. So how do you basically navigate that? And for us, it was just a lot of innovation around the 100 milligram drinks and finding a way to make sure that they taste good enough to sell. So you guys, I'm sure, have had a lot of 100 milligram drinks are not good enough to sell. They're painful.
So Colorado legalizes 2014. You guys are still around. Everything's kind of starting to pick up. Talk about like expansion efforts, the first kind of few years of rec. Like what were the first states you guys expanded to? And then kind of like how that whole expansion is going as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, our first goal with legalization in Colorado was to solidify our position here. We moved into a new building, which is where I'm currently sitting right now. So we took it over in September of 2013. So about 11 years ago, almost exactly, we moved into our current space. I got it operational in the new space by January of 14, hit the rec market, and, really spent the next year and a half just focusing on what products worked, really understanding and learning in a lot of regards how to mass manufacture beverage, because prior to that, obviously, it was very niche with the medical side. I think our biggest months we ever had on the medical in Colorado were on beverage alone. And obviously, we did vape pens and everything else, which we had to. I mean, oil really saved our ass for the first 4 or 5 years, selling concentrates as well. I mean, we might have broken 100,000 one or 2 months during those first 4 years. So, and that's in revenue. Whereas now, fast forward to today, in Colorado alone, we move 150,000 units a month of beverages through the regulated channel, not in liquor stores. So a massive increase in volume and really figuring out that before we expanded into licensing models. Once we got that under our belt, our first licensing agreement, we brought Bang chocolate to Colorado and manufactured Bang for about a year in 2013 and 14, and ended up winning the High Times Cup in 2014 with the Bang bars. So we got a taste of licensing with another brand then. But it wasn't until 2016 that we really licensed Keef out of Colorado. And that year we ended up with 3 licensees. The first one we actually fully executed on was actually Puerto Rico. It's our oldest licensed market outside of Colorado, which we're actually going through an ownership change there. And we have a new licensee coming on that we're excited about. But then it went Arizona and California. We licensed back to California to Kiva. Yeah, that was really probably where that and the Arizona partnership were where we learned the most for sure. And we stuck with those 3 licensees until about 2018 when we really started expanding. Looking at some of the newer states that were coming on. I think at that point we moved into Nevada very briefly. It's been tough. I'll be honest with you guys, man. The licensing side, and I think any brand will tell you, it's all about the people you partner with. And in this industry, early on, you can't paint the whole industry with a brush, but there's definitely a lot of unsavory characters out there and fly-by-night organizations that were basically Ponzi schemes. We fell into a couple of those traps in licensing early on. So vetting partnerships became a huge, huge deal for us. I think we got really lucky on those first three just because they were all three so solid that when it came to the next ones, we got a little cocky and we had about 3 fails in a row. Honestly, we failed in Michigan, we failed in Nevada, lost a lot of money on both ventures, and then went into Oklahoma. Yeah, I think that was probably the next deal that we signed in 19, and it really just had some decent growth. But as you guys know, Oklahoma was a mess without the regulation and everything. Products were flooded everywhere. There was literally, it became a bloodbath quickly. So it was that time we kind of pulled back, started really looking at, who our partners were going to be, spent a lot more time getting to know people, checking out operations, looking at books. Yeah, and that's when our real growth started in about 2021. 2020, right as COVID hit. I took in 2020 and 21 during COVID, I made almost 300 flights, which is nice because nobody was on the airplanes. I guess we were an industry that was deemed a necessary,
essential
industry. So
Eric, I want to go back to one of the things you said is you had to learn mass manufacturing of beverages.
Yep.
Where does one learn that? That's not a textbook you pick up, right? That's not something an easy Google search, especially in cannabis. So where does one start to understand how that works and then what to do from there?
So, and when I say mass manufacturing, it's really not even mass because we had to almost develop commercial manufacturing at scale, small scale. So we produce millions of units. For a regular brewery, it's that easy because they can just do it in one state. We had to figure out how to commercially produce a replicable product in what we're now 15 regulated states plus Puerto Rico. Every state has to produce it. And the rec states, you have to do it at a somewhat commercial scale. Obviously not the scale that we're doing on the D9 side, but it's definitely, there's not a whole lot of equipment that's made out there for that. And in 2015, there was none. I mean, we found the only real piece, which is this Maheen filler that we had, which is a 6-head counter pressure filling bottles, which was not ideal. And, so we ended up bringing on consultants. One of our current board members is still with us. We actually, Scott Coors family. Scott was, I think, worked as the chief technology officer over at Coors prior to it being sold. Bill Coors' son. Bill was the CEO for 40 years, I want to say, something like that, long time. So, bringing in knowledge from them. At the time when we first got introduced, Scott was 2013, 14. He was running a company that he had started called Alico, which is basically one of the first extruded aluminum printing companies. So they actually manufactured aluminum cans and then printed labels on those cans. So we actually met him originally for a supply contract, and ended up his team that he had over there, a lot of them were from Ball Corporation. They had worked in breweries. So we just got to know him really well. As we were scaling, started to bring on some additional resource basically through that channel. That really helped us kind of build the model that we have now, which is a replicable model that's easily produced across multiple states. But I would say that the key to the whole thing has been that really our focus on manufacturing. Whereas a lot of brands license it out, and that's the last they see of it. Beverage really isn't that simple. It's like I said, it's probably the most difficult to produce. We put the most resources into our manufacturing practices, more than pretty much everything else, marketing, anything, to get to where we are now, where we can actually start putting some into marketing.
That's why I wanted to reiterate that, because I think people just sometimes don't understand the concepts, right? You've produced something locally in one state, you've worked really hard, you've got all this tech that works really good, and then you go to expand it to other states and you face similar challenges, new challenges, combination of both. And there's not like a textbook you can just lean into that just guess, test, and revise. Is that really the best process to solve those problems?
Yeah, that's the best way to describe it, man, especially when you're talking about cannabis and cannabis testing. The early years of licensing, I mean, we were the only beverage in most of these markets. And a lot of them still are really the only beverage that sells in the actual regulated space. So we would literally have to go in and teach the testing companies how to test this product, especially when we're doing the cold wire hash side. But, I'd say that's probably one of the biggest hurdles. Anywhere, all the way down to water. Just different water in different facilities leads to different results. So really, SOPs around water activity, making sure that the water sources are clean. So obviously this is an ingestible product. So, the RO systems that are used, many times they're reintroducing anything back into them. It's It's a challenge, and we definitely ran into this. I mean, Ohio was a prime example of it. We could not figure out what was going on with the product. We finally just dug into the water, and sure enough, there was issues in the hardness and some other things that we just didn't know. We wasted 6 months of production time throwing away batches that just would not stay in emulsion.
Just fighting through the unknowns of like, can it be this? Can it be this? Can it be this? And then someone brings up, hey, maybe we should check the water.
100%. And then layer on top of that, obviously changing rules and regulations in every market. So,
while trying to maintain the brand, right?
You're right. You're a CPG brand. I think then again, like it's one step even farther. It's like at the end of the day, you walk into a convenience store, like now at least, and you see 100 different beverages, and cannabis now associated with them is essentially what a hemp beverage or cannabis beverage is. It's a CPG product, which I think sometimes people also forget.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's been obviously the regulated side is extremely challenging on that. I mean, Canada, we can have Keef about this big on the label and a single color for each different flavor, and that's it. That's your branding. Arizona, we had to pull off all of our strain branding because they won't let you call it Bubba Kush root beer. So it's just the BK root beer. So all of our marketing and branding around it had to change, and that was 7 years into us being in the market. They made that change. So this is happening still to this day, where it's, you have a change in Congress or, local, and they want to put their fingerprint on cannabis. So, there goes another however many units of packaging.
Makes it easy when every state has their own packaging requirements.
Oh yeah, it's a blast, man.
How do you balance like following the different rules and regs with the different markets, just given all the different areas your team plays in? Does that come from like the top, or do you have like individual leaders in different states that have to be responsible for following those different paths?
So once again, I think it goes back to really partnerships. To do it all yourself in this space is way too much. I think especially for a brand. So we definitely lean on our local partners. Obviously, we have a compliance team within Keef that made, from QC all the way to labels. We're all over it as well. But it really comes down to partnerships and people making sure that, as you're going out there, you can rely on them to treat your brand as their own and everything that goes along with that. And obviously from a compliance standpoint and regulatory, it's everything. You put out a product that's not compliant, you get that type of black eye in the market, it's hard to come back from it. So, really, it's leaning on your partners and like I said before, just making sure that you've done every single piece of diligence you can on whoever you go into business with.
So we spoke about the cannabis markets and your team being in a bunch of those, but there's also the hemp beverages that are exploding across the United States. Can you kind of give our listeners maybe unfamiliar about the differences, kind of high-level overview of the differences of the two of them and how your team is able to kind of navigate both?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess to kind of wrap up on the regulated side, I think at this point we're with Maryland, Illinois, Arkansas, and Massachusetts really fully coming online this year, and Michigan too to a certain extent. I think we brought five regulated markets back online or online this year, along with the relaunch in Nevada. Obviously, those ones are all state produced. Every state has different rules and regulations. Massachusetts, for example, 5 milligrams per container. So all the Keefs, if you go to Mass, are 5 milligrams. If you go down the coast of Maryland, they are 10 milligrams. But we're also producing, or about to start producing, our 100 plus milligram drinks on the medical side in Maryland because that market's still big as well. So, and then when you go to Arkansas, it's all 100 milligram drinks because it's a medical market. In Oregon, it's a rec market, but we do 100 milligram drinks. And in California, with our relaunch with Kiva just this year now, we relaunched with only 100 milligram drinks to start. We are going to start layering in some 25s and 10s. Definitely probably going to start producing a lot more 10s again based on, shifting gears into the hemp side, the way we're regulating that or dealing with that. The governor came out, I think, Friday and pretty much put the death nail in intoxicating hemp in California. So for us, we had been kind of waiting to see what was going to happen there before we greenlit anything. AB 223 did have there was a chance that they were going to regulate in some moderate level of, Delta 9 THC from hemp. Unfortunately, I think once again, it's a double-edged sword, and sometimes you get what you ask for. The hemp industry really went hard against the 1 milligram, so I don't think they got anything done. And then the governor shortly thereafter came and banned all of it. So it is really a challenge on that side right now. As Keef, we have basically made it a policy that we are not entering regulated states with hemp-derived products. So if there is a regulated channel already in place selling THC, regardless of how lucrative it might be for us to ship to the liquor stores in those states, as it currently sits without a bill coming from Congress at the federal level that expressly authorizes these products to be sold, we feel that it's too risky, and it creates too much volatility in the market for our partners that have real capex in these markets. We work with all of the MSOs. A lot of people, obviously, the regulated industry has been painted as a monopolistic industry. I can assure you it is not. We literally sell to every MSO, and that's still only about 30% of our total business. In Colorado alone, most of our business is derived from 1 to 2 shop owners operating mom and pop shops similar to mom and pop liquor stores. And to go into a liquor store right next to those mom and pops in states where they've put all their hard-earned money into these operations right now without, like I said, any type of clearance from the federal government, aside from the Farm Bill, which really doesn't regulate finished product at all, just seemed irresponsible of us. So we've made the decision that, if a state like Kentucky or Tennessee or Florida decides, hey, we're going to let this happen, or in a case like Florida where there is a regulated market, they don't allow beverage. So we don't have any market access anyways. Even if we wanted to be in the medical cannabis space in Florida right now, there's no way for us to produce a Keef product and sell it because the OMMU doesn't allow it. So those are really the two big challenges. Do we have another way to access the market through the regulated channel? If we check that box no, then we'll look at doing it on the hemp side. But once again, even on that, look at a state like Iowa. We're not shipping into Iowa. And that's where I think just common sense comes into play. As this is going through these committees, we know where Chuck Grassley sits on marijuana. Senator Grassley is not in favor of it. And a lot of the big kickback and what's happening in the hemp industry right now is people were profiteering. They weren't really looking at the global picture. When Grassley's hearing from his constituents that they're going into gas stations and there's 30% THCA flower, hemp flower, sitting on the gas station shelves, they've essentially legalized weed when they haven't. And then when the state itself isn't pulling in favor of it, we're not going to enter a state like that where we can risk everything, especially with the brand that we've built on the regulated side. It's not worth it when we can operate in states like Texas and Kentucky and Tennessee under the red state laws, basically the red state weed laws, what we're calling them, I guess. Yeah, I mean, let's be real. Texas alone is worth it for us. The permits they're giving to liquor stores at this point, we could do all of our D9 business in Texas and Florida, and I wouldn't have to look anywhere else. That being said, Tennessee and Kentucky passed great bills that allow it. So we're really being, like I said, very thoughtful in how we enter that space, trying not to step on the toes of our retail partners on the regulated side. But also I want to see cannabis legalized everywhere. So we're definitely going to participate.
From like a macro philosophical perspective, where do you see these two industries like in 5 years? Like, how do they live in harmony? You know what I mean?
So I think
that's a tough question.
It's a really tough question. Honestly, though, I think beverage is the tip of the spear. It's the one that the federal government can wrap their arms around the easiest because you already have TTB in place. You have, 21 and up rules and regulations already out there. So it's an easy channel to test cannabis in on a federal level. So I think that's going to be the first area where it's going to open it up. And obviously, if you get something like that passed through, then you can go back to a state like California and say, all right, now we have a federal law. It's totally different. And, but it expressly delineates the channels that you can sell through. So I see it eventually falling basically like Colorado. If Colorado sells alcohol, you can go into a liquor store and buy anything you want. You can go into a gas station or a grocer and buy beer and wine. And I think low dose edibles will fall into that beer and wine. I think if you want concentrates, you want flower, you go to a liquor store. And in this case, the liquor store is a dispensary. But I think that really will be where it falls. I have a hard time believing they're going to just open the door for flower to be sold everywhere anytime soon. Once again, there's a lot of regulatory framework to come down on that. But I really do believe that alcohol is the easiest one. or not alcohol, the beverage is going to be the easiest just due to the pre-existing channels, the ability for TTB to take it on from a taxation standpoint, and work within the 3-tier system that wine, spirits, and beer have already basically tread out. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 18 months you saw a standalone bill in Congress authorizing low-dose cannabis beverages.
Do you think, though, that the supply chain, right, should be like also segregated in terms of form factors, right? Like, because you could make a beverage that's sold in a high-dose beverage from hemp THCA, right? Just as well as you could from cannabis. So, like, is there a commingling of the supply chains kind of behind the scenes? Is that already happening too? I'm like in California right now, they're going to ban it, but like, how can they track every THCA molecule? You know what I mean?
The way that they're doing it and how they're figuring out is, there's lawsuits being dropped in Colorado right now, civil lawsuits actually between regulated producers here in the state that have dropped in the last 2 months. Most of the THCA oil that's out there, or the Delta 9 oil being used in edibles, is produced through a conversion process. It's not grown on a plant. So I don't like the term synthetic because it's not synthetic. It's not like it was created out of thin air.
Biomimicry.
It's synthesized. Exactly. It's synthesized from one molecule to another. In this case, CBD to THC. Now, through that process, there are traceable remnants of solvent that are used in acids that you can test the oil. And unfortunately, most of the marijuana testing companies don't have the capabilities right now or the procedures, but there are plenty of testing companies that do. In the case in Colorado, they tested some of the oil and some of these other products, and they filed unfair trade practice lawsuits, specifically civil lawsuits around people using hemp-derived converted CBD to THC in products in the regulated space. I don't believe long-term there's any need. In 5 years from now, people are going to be laughing about this conversion process, because why in the hell would you ever grow a 15% CBD plant and convert the CBD plant through harsh chemical process into THC when you can grow a 35% THC plant and do no conversion except extract it? So I don't really see a place for the hemp industry long-term on the CBD side supplying THC anywhere, because it just doesn't make financial sense. Right now it does, because there's a plethora of CBD and the THC is regulated per square foot, per light, whatever any state does. And it's obviously extremely costly when you're talking about, doing it on the regulated side. But I think long-term, it's single source. It's coming from the plants themselves. It's coming from large fields. We've already seen the commercial viability of THC strains in California growing at 50 to 100 acres, 200 acres. It's the same plant as hemp. When you get the right varieties, they will thrive just like a hemp plant outdoors with very little, care. So especially if you're just going for oil at the end of the day. So I think in the interim, it's going to be a debate. I think long term, there's no room for the hemp industry and hemp to supply THC. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, it makes sense when you're talking about CBN, CBG, THCV, a lot of these other minor cannabinoids that let's be real, you're not going to want to waste THC canopy to grow those plants. So I think there is space for it, and it's where I think that this debate really is going to wind up is, the hemp side is the minor cannabinoid side of the industry. It's what it was. It's what the 2019 Farm Bill was all about, was opening up minor cannabinoids. It wasn't about opening up THC to the masses. I'm glad it happened, obviously. But it's also caused a lot of confusion within the marketplace. And I think it not properly handled, it has, obviously, like we're seeing with the Mary Miller Amendment, other things like this, through exploitation, it could also come to bite everyone in the ass. So I think it really does need to be watched. People should be very thoughtful of where they're shipping product right now. Obviously, direct to consumer is huge. We have friendly competitors, guys that I know really well. They're doing amazing work online shipping product. We're not doing it yet. I think, it's a complicated business model, especially with beverage. I don't know if there's a whole lot of profit in it that would outweigh the risk right now.
So I want to make sure people understand like the differences, right? When you go to a new market in a regulated market, you've got to spin up a facility or have a licensing partner where you can produce in that area, and then I guess charge based on the COGS and put a profit margin on for that area. In the hemp market, like in the red states, like you said, if you're doing it direct to consumer, you can have one large warehouse, maybe in a single facility that's producing for all those states. So then your unit economics are way better.
Way better. Yeah, but extremely.
Yeah. Can you just give people like an understanding so they understand like the depths of those differences?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so like I said before, we have in the United States right now on the regulated side, we have 15 canning facilities operating at commercial scale.
And
Is that more than Coca-Cola?
Yeah.
I think it actually is at this point. So.
Because Pepsi's like, why?
And honestly, guys, it's insanity. It shouldn't be there, and it's part of why we really do want to see something. The federal government make a move on this. From a beverage and edible standpoint, you should be able to produce in one of these regulated states with oversight and be able to ship. The issue that obviously we face is every state has had tremendous CapEx put into it. These MSOs in particular have spent hundreds of millions of dollars in building out large facilities in every state. So the day that, they allow California to just ship weed into Illinois is a long ways away right now. You've got a lot of CapEx that needs to be returned to investors, and a lot of it's institutional money in public companies now before they open the door for that to happen. And that is the bandsaw that hemp walked into by shipping into states like Illinois. You wind up with billion-dollar enemies, which are the MSOs that obviously are still looking to recoup all of this CapEx they put into it and create these moated markets. For us, on the D9 side, to finish the question, we produce everything in Minnesota right now with Indeed Brewing. They're a great partner, pretty large-sized microbrewer. We produce in massive tanks, that then supply about 9 different states, big states right now with our product. So it is a completely different economy of scale, obviously a much more profitable scale than what we've been currently operating at.
But the consumer benefits the most potentially, right? Because they're not getting...
for sure. Your COGS are so much lower.
$20 a can.
It passes through the consumer at the end of the day. I mean, our 10 milligram products, we sell a case wholesale right now to liquor stores. I mean, Total Wine for $52.50 or something, $55. And that is about $20 lower than what we sell it to in the regulated market right now. So on a per unit basis, and those are in 4-pack boxes, sleeved, really nice looking products. So yeah, it's a completely different economy of scale. And I fully understand why everybody has jumped into that side. Obviously we've seen a lot of legacy brands in Colorado completely evacuate the space and go 100% into that side. 1906 probably being the most famous of them, that just completely, and they were founded here in Colorado, first market. They pulled out at the end of last year, and now they ship their product. I don't know that shipping it into Colorado. I don't think they are. It's a little dangerous to ship into Colorado right now. Our attorney general, I think, just filed a civil lawsuit last week or 2 weeks ago against a couple major hemp producers for shipping into Colorado. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that type of action being taken, especially in the regulated states by the AGs. They're going to go the civil route and not the criminal route. There's just no way to take the limited law enforcement appetite for cannabis right now and apply it to hemp. So what you're seeing across the board right now are civil lawsuits dropping, both between companies and from attorney generals that are looking to go after people's purse strings, which historically is the way you shut business down. So it's, once again, going back to it, it's why we've chosen not to ship yet. If a state's got rules and regs around hemp, we're going to ship the product into licensed, regulated 21 and up channels like liquor stores where we know everybody's getting ID'd. Kids don't have easy access to it on the shelves. It's just, you got to apply common sense to this thing. As much as I think every single one of us want to see cannabis legalized all over the country, unfortunately, there are still a lot of lawmakers and there's a lot of money against that. Even if it's quiet money, there is still a contingency of prohibitionists out there that do not want to see this happen.
So take us through the challenge of balancing all these variables from a different market to market standpoint, but also understanding like the unknowns in front of you. How do you plan 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 12, 24 months in order to try to say, okay, like if this happens, we'll do this. If this happens, we'll do this. How does that work?
That's a tricky, it's a whack-a-mole. We go to the fair every year and just practice whack-a-mole. That's a lot of planning. I think, for us, we've been really lucky in that, I helped form a couple of the largest trade organizations in cannabis. Early on, we were part of NCIA. And in 2013, I helped found Attach out of Pennsylvania with Michael Bronstein. We worked basically from then till now on most of the East Coast states, opening up access through regulated channels. Being in DC constantly, I'm in DC next week for 3 days. It'll be my third trip there this year. I'll probably have one more after that. So just as best you can, keeping your ear to the ground. Obviously, with the hemp side, we sit on the Cannabis Beverages Association on the board there as well, which then works with a lot of the other hemp organizations, trying to figure out, sensible regulation on that side, while also obviously trying to, maintain relationship with the other side as well. So it's tough. It's definitely threading the needle. And once again, not overproducing. I think we learned early on, don't order more labels, don't order anything more than what you need for the next 6 months. I've seen a lot of businesses go under over the years by just, this world changes so rapidly. You cannot forecast the way you would a regular industry at this point. Yeah. And I think that would be my best advice to everybody right now is just whatever you can get by from on obviously an economical side. You don't want to not order enough, but, be wary of how far over your skis you get because it's easy to topple.
Do you guys have to order completely different packaging for like the Delta 9 hemp side of the brand versus the THCA side, or is there some kind of overlap that you guys can manage?
Luckily we do get the economy of scale on the cans. So our can pricing, because we're using a standard 2-piece can across the board. So our can pricing has gone down since we've entered the D9 space, which is good. The lids are different. So obviously on the regulated side, we have to use a CR reclosable, resealable lid. On the D9 side, it's just a standard beer soda pop top. So it's not a whole lot of overlap on that side, but definitely on the cans, we've seen a lot of benefit there. And then on the labels, we're using shrink labels on the D9 side. We're now using shrink labels in California, Maryland, Arizona. I don't want to say one other state right now. So we have seen some cost benefit of being able to bulk order those. Once again, though, they're all printed different. So it's not a huge benefit, but yeah, on the bright cans, it definitely, that's helped a lot. And on the flavoring and everything else, when you're buying for bulk, like we are now on the D9 side, that cost benefit does go through to the regulated side and eventually to the consumer there as well.
What question do you wish more people asked you?
Oh, man. Oh, man, that's a tough question, dude. It has a lot of questions. Let's see. What's been your most enjoyable experience in cannabis?
What has been?
I would say the people, man. Honestly, as big of a pain in the ass as it's been at times. This industry and the friendships that I've made throughout it over the years have really helped me through all the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys of this industry. So I think just going all the way back to it again, it's people for sure.
1 year from now, Eric, what has changed either from the industry or for Keef?
1 year from now, hopefully we have a bill in Congress that's moving through to legalize cannabis beverage.
Let's go.
Is that an optimistic take or?
I think it's an optimistic, realistic take. I think that there's the appetite for it now. I think with the big liquor distributors and retailers that are getting behind this, there's a real lobby that we have to lean on now that has gotten their beaks wet in it. And especially when you're looking at the fact that, every state that legalizes cannabis, you're seeing after several years a 20% decrease in alcohol sales. There is a big push coming from that side to help cannabis because they now understand how to monetize it themselves and participate and then make up those lost profits. So I do believe it's a realistic, optimistic view, but at some point I think it's going to happen, and it'll be the first real full legalization effort that we're going to see.
Last question, one message you would send to somebody who's interested in trying a THC beverage, but just has never done it before?
Go slow. With all edibles. Slow and low. You can always have more, but it's hard to get it out once you've taken it.
That's perfect. So Eric, for our listeners, they want to get in touch, they want to learn more about Keef, where can they find you?
It's keefbrands.com. Got our maps on there. Obviously, if you're in non-regulated states, Texas, we are in all of the Total Wine and Spirits. We will be in all of the fine food and wines, I believe, by the end of the month across all Texas, and then Total Wine all through Florida and a number of other states, and then a bunch of other, obviously, liquor store and retailers in Tennessee and Kentucky and all over the place. But and then obviously in the regulated channels, you can go into most of our retail partners, big national retail partners, and find us in there. So whether that's, working with the Trulieve groups or Verano or GTI, Curaleafs, we're in most of those locations. A lot of them have different names, obviously, in different states, but pretty much across the board. And then, back to it at the very end of it, most mom and pops, we hang our hat on service and working with everybody. So I think we're almost 100% penetration in Missouri, almost 100% in Colorado, and California is rising very rapidly as well. So, and Maryland, pretty much every state that we're in. So, but yeah, the website's the easiest way to find us.
Awesome. We'll link it all the show notes. Thanks for taking the time. This was a lot of fun.
You bet, guys. Hey, thanks for having me on, man.
Thank you.